Hi everyone, and welcome to Elite Rugby SandC podcast. First off, if you haven't already, sign up and join Elite Rugby SandC today. We provide you all your strength, conditioning, speed, and recovery needs. You can try before you buy, so try our 7-day $7 trial to get a taste of what we offer here at Elite Rugby SandC. Sign up to our newsletter and receive free bonus content each and every single week. So take your game to the next level, become a beast, and join Elite Rugby SandC today. In this episode, Kieren sits down with Sports Dietitian Kelsey Hutton. Kelsey graduated from the University of Newcastle in 2017 and has been working in the field for 5 years. Kelsey currently works with the Parramatta Eels in the NRL competition. Outside of the NRL, Kelsey works with elite and amateur level athletes in a range of sports including NBL, Super Rugby and AFL. Kelsey provides knowledge on the role of a sports dietitian, how to maximize your nutrition for training and game day, advice on supplements, and the better option when it comes to fast food, and much, much more. We hope you enjoy this episode. So g'day, Kelsey. How are you?
Hey, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me on the podcast today.
It's great to have you on. So how do you think the boys went on the weekend?
It was a good game. Was very happy watching that one. I went to watch the boys. Bit better than the previous week.
It's definitely a good way to bounce back, which was awesome to see. For those listeners out there, I didn't even tell Kelsey this before we started. I have been a Parramatta fan for a long time now, so it's a bit of a love-hate relationship, but yeah, definitely a Parramatta fan. So it's great to have you on today. So how long have you been working as a sports dietitian and working in sport?
So same answer for both. I have been a dietitian for 5 years, and I actually started working in sport immediately as soon as I graduated. I started in an internship before my graduation with the Waratahs. That was the first team I worked with, and then that turned into a job.
That's awesome. So what is the current team, just to make sure that everyone knows that you're working with?
So my current team is Parramatta Eels NRL team. I was also with the Sydney Kings and New South Wales Waratahs this year on more of an ad hoc basis. My main team that I work with is Parramatta Eels, but obviously the Kings and Waratahs seasons finished up a few weeks ago now.
Did you find there's a difference between working in rugby league to union to basketball?
The rugby union to rugby league question is one that I get asked a lot. People always want to know the difference between the two. It's actually like a very different environment in terms of the players. At the end of the day, the nutrition job itself is pretty similar across most sport teams that I work with, in terms of the foundations of nutrition and all that stuff that we're going to get into. But yeah, the culture and things is quite different across different clubs. And Sydney Kings basketball, that was the first season I worked with them this year. And that was quite interesting because that's a professional team, but we often say it's kind of in a semi-professional training environment. Just because of funding, it changes so much about what the team can do in terms of training. They had a great season. They won the grand final, obviously. But yeah, very interesting going to that sort of environment, especially after being with the Eels now for 3 years, which is very much a sort of professional environment with some good funding.
Yeah, totally. So can you tell us what a sports dietitian is, and how does that differ from someone saying that they're just like a nutritional coach?
All right, so a sports dietitian is someone that has studied a uni course that's approved by Dietitians Australia. So Dietitians Australia is like our credentialing sort of governing body of dietitians. So we have to do a university degree that's approved by them. And at the end of that degree, we can then apply for accreditation with Dietitians Australia and call ourselves an accredited practicing dietitian. And we pay for that membership each year, and we have to do like professional development hours and mentoring. And that's very similar to like other health professions as well. Doctors, physios, EPs, they all have to do that sort of stuff. So what that just means is that because we have that, accrediting body, it means that we stay accountable to like our code of conduct and the policies and best practice guidelines as dietitians. And it also ensures that we stay up to date with all the latest in research. So on the other hand, a nutritionist is not a protected title in the way that dietitian is. So pretty much anyone could call themselves a nutritionist if they wanted to. There are legitimate nutrition degrees out there, and people that practice as nutritionists do a great job, but it does mean that sometimes there are people out there who practice as nutritionists or nutrition coaches that don't really have legitimate qualifications in that area. And so it's just something to look out for, that if someone is calling themselves a nutrition coach, just have a look at what their credentials are. Because if someone is a nutritionist or a nutrition coach but not a dietitian, it means that they are actually only qualified to work with healthy populations. So they can only provide general healthy eating advice. Unfortunately, people work in that area and often provide a lot more than just that, but that's what they're qualified to do. Whereas a dietitian can do exactly that plus more. And so sports nutritionist or sports dietitian specifically, so we're accredited dietitians that have then done extra study on top of that to specialize in the area of sports nutrition.
That's great. I think a lot of people can get confused, and you do see a few interesting Instagram titles or like subheadings saying nutrition coach or something like that, or you go on TikTok and someone's claiming to be a nutritionist type thing and don't have that accreditation by the governing body. So it's it's really good that you clarified that, and hopefully athletes and coaches out there have a better understanding of that now. So what are the keys to maximizing your nutrition for training and game day? Hard question to answer, but I'm keen to see what you have to say.
Yep. So I could probably go on a bit of a long tangent about this one. So stop me if I'm rambling on for too long. But I would say the number one thing to really nail first when it comes to maximizing your nutrition is actually organization. So when it comes to your training and game days, particularly game day, your preparation nutritionally for that should be starting at least 48 hours prior to the game. And so being organized with thinking ahead to what have I got on, what training, what time is my game, what else do I have to factor in around all of that stuff, when am I going to get an opportunity to eat, and what should I be eating at that time, means that you're going to be nailing your training and your game day nutrition if you are thinking in advance and you are organizing and prepping. It doesn't mean you have to do meal prep for every single meal of the week, but just being a little bit organized of thinking ahead, knowing what you've got on, how do I fit my food in around that is going to go such a long way. And it's probably the biggest mistake that I see people make is not being organized when it comes to their nutrition. And I think about young athletes that are going from work throughout the day and then into trainings at nighttime and then their game days on the weekend. They're busy people. And what I see often is people not organizing, not prepping, and then, on Smoko grabbing like a sausage roll from 7-Eleven, and then lunch is like, fish and chips or something like that. And just not getting it right because you're not thinking about what you need to be packing or what the best option is. So organization, absolutely key. And on game day, this really comes into play with your game day, because that organization and that prep and getting it right in those few days before game day is really going to pay off. A lot of people get nervous on game day and they don't have much of an appetite and find that eating is difficult on game day. And that's why your adequate prep beforehand is so important, because that's just helped you to get ready for game day. Even if you don't feel like eating a huge amount, at least you've prepped in the days beforehand.
Totally. It's a great answer. And do you think having some snacks available, say if you're a student or working on the tools all day, just available to be able to eat on the way to training and from training is quite handy to do?
Absolutely. I always say it's better to be over-prepared than under-prepared. And obviously in the space that I work with and the teams that I work with, I'm also working with a lot of the academy guys and, our junior reps players who are in that situation where they're studying or they're working during the day and then trainings at nighttime. And that's the number one thing I say is you can keep a packet of muesli bars in your car. You can keep a packet of nuts. You can keep some tuna tins. Think about all those foods that don't need to be kept refrigerated, that you don't actually have to prep at all. They're just ready to eat. That stuff is going to be there for when you're driving from one place to the next, driving from work to training. At least you're getting something in and something that's nutritious, even if it's not, what we might think of as being the perfect option. It's something, and something is better than nothing in most scenarios.
And I think having those options that you just said can help stop, I don't know, the cravings of seeing some fast food. Oh yeah, I'll just go there and get that. Whereas if you have that snack available when you're eating it, you're probably going to make a bit more, you're going to make the better decision instead of the one that you might regret after eating. So yeah.
Absolutely. Avoid the post-training drive home Macca's drive-through and have a couple of options in your car. You can snack on those. It'll tie you over till you get home. You're going to be much better off for it.
I think it's really important for people who live in sort of a bigger city. So Canberra doesn't take you far to get around. It takes maybe 20, 30 minutes max. Whereas in Sydney, you could be looking at an hour plus travel. So it's really important to have those snacks ready for you to consume on the way home.
Absolutely.
So do athletes playing team sports like rugby union, rugby league really need to be carb loading sort of the day and night before a game?
No. Short answer. So athletes in those sports don't need to carb load. A carb load by definition is eating above your normal daily carb requirements to saturate stores of carbohydrates in the body for 24 to 72 hours prior to an endurance event. But we wouldn't count rugby union and rugby league as endurance events. So with your normal carbohydrate intake on a daily basis, you should actually have enough carbohydrates available in the body to last throughout a game of rugby union or rugby league, including warm-up as well. So what I always say to players is that you don't need to carb load. People tend to go the opposite when I say that. They think, oh, okay, are you saying I need to eat low carb the day before a game? No, I'm not saying low carb. Just eat your normal daily carbohydrate requirements. We don't need to go above that. We don't need to go below it. Eating your normal carbohydrate daily requirements the day before and the day of your game is what's going to help you get through that game. So we don't need to do the carb load in what the actual definition of it is, but you still need to be eating carbs in the lead up to a game.
What are some of the meals you recommend the night before a game?
So I often use the performance plate as a little bit of a guide for people. So if you've never heard of the performance plate before, do a quick Google image search of what it looks like, but I'll explain that as well. So the performance plate is basically, if you imagine a dinner plate, divide it into, I'm going to say thirds for the night before a game. So 1/3 of your plate would be filled with the carbohydrate foods, preferably low GI carbs, which are like your slower digesting carbohydrates. Then 1/3 is filled with your protein foods, for example, chicken or fish or meat, whatever your protein option is. And then 1/3 of your plate is filled with vegetables. So a big reason why I don't recommend people are carb loading for rugby union and rugby league games is that if they're carb loading, it means that they're probably filling up that entire plate with carbs like pasta or rice, and there's not actually very much protein mixed in with that, and definitely not a lot of vegetables. But the protein and the veggies are just as important for our game day performance as the carbohydrates are, and that night before is a good opportunity to get that in, because on the day of your game or on game day is when we want to start prioritizing those meals being a little bit heavier in the carbs and a little bit less of the veggies and the protein. So the night before, get a nice even mix of some carbs, protein, and vegetables. That's just helping to top up all of your nutrients before game day. And so what a meal could look like that combines all three of those things is a chicken and veggie stir fry with some rice, or a nice sort of chicken tomato-based sauce pasta, and then serve some veggies or some salad on the side. Or you might do like a risotto with some vegetables on the side. So I usually say any kind of rice or pasta based meal works great the night before. Just make sure you have some vegetables on the side. And my last suggestion as well for the night before a game is stick to like a lighter meat, like chicken or maybe some white fish, rather than the red meats. A lot of people will feel like they're fine if they have steak the night before a game, and that's totally fine. But some people feel like it's a little bit heavy. It is just more nutrient dense and often higher in fat than chicken. So it just takes a little bit longer to digest. If you're getting nervous in the lead up to a game, it's probably not ideally what you want. So something a little bit lighter and easier to digest like chicken is ideal for a lot of people.
So what would be some lighter options on the game day? So say if you're playing, depending if you're a Colts age player, you're playing around 12, 1 o'clock. What would be sort of the lighter options in the morning that, you get nervous? What are some of those lighter options?
Yeah. So look, before a 12 o'clock game, you got warm up beforehand. So you probably, and like depending if you have to watch the games before your game in the morning, you're probably arriving maybe 2 hours beforehand. So there isn't actually time for a lunch meal. All you're going to be having time for in the morning is breakfast. What I always suggest is first golden rule of game day is don't try anything new on game day, but also don't be superstitious. So what you have for breakfast during the week normally is probably a good option for your game day breakfast. Hopefully, we're nailing a good breakfast during the week. So, hopefully, we're not getting up and having a tradies breakfast on the way to work. Hopefully, something nutritious. So, for some people, that might look like some scrambled eggs on toast, or it might be, some cereal like Wheat Bix with some fruit on top, or some rolled oats, make it into porridge with some fruit on top. But if you're someone that's really struggling with appetite because you are feeling nervous, something like a smoothie can be a little bit easier to eat or consume on game day for breakfast. Big reason for that is firstly, you don't have to look at a whole plate of food. When you don't have an appetite and we see a big full plate of food, we're immediately going to be turned off that and not really want to eat it. So a smoothie, it's all blended up, put it into a cup so you don't even visually have to see it to start with. And then you can just be sipping on that across the morning while you do a little bit of your prep and everything at home before you leave the house to get to the game. But you can actually pack lots of nutrients into a smoothie, so it can be a really great way to still get in that energy before your game, and sits a little bit easier in the stomach when you are feeling nervous before the game.
That's awesome. And for the people who are playing, say, first grade at 3 p.m., is it having more of a bigger breakfast than a light lunch, or is it, obviously it's very subjective, but do you recommend having that good breakfast that you just had during the week and then maybe something light around 11, 12-ish before going in and start getting ready for the game?
Yeah, for majority of people, that's going to be what sort of sits best for most people before a game. So the general rule that I would just say to aim for there is have that lunch 3 to 4 hours before kickoff time. So considering, again, that you've got warm up an hour beforehand, but you might be arriving at the fields a little bit before that, or you might be watching the game beforehand. So planning comes in here. You need to plan out what you're going to have, whether you have it at home before you leave to watch before you get to your game, or if you pack something that you're going to eat and watch while you're watching the game before yours. Lots of factors to consider, but for most people, they're going to find that the lighter lunch, bigger breakfast is going to sit better in their stomach than having like a big lunch beforehand. But lunch 3 to 4 hours beforehand should allow plenty of time for that to digest, so it's not sitting in your stomach when you're playing. But still, we're picking sort of the lighter options like chicken as the protein within that lunch, and then some carbs. It doesn't need to be heavy on vegetables. It's not really a priority at that time.
Awesome. And it's always fascinating to see what people do on game day. And it just comes back to routine. As you said, I remember when I was playing, I like to feel like I'm full. I want a full belly, not like full, like I've just eaten the whole meal, I'm going to play. It's just, I like having something in there. And if I wasn't full, I would just have like a quick banana before I went out in the field. Whereas other people are just like, nah, I want to feel light, because I feel light, I feel fast. So yeah, it's always fascinating to hear players' different perspectives on that.
This is purely anecdotal, but going back to your question before about like the differences between rugby union and rugby league, that's actually one of the key differences that I found is the perception on game day. So when I was at the Waratahs, the players loved, like they were great at eating before a game, and in the change rooms we would have these like chicken and salad wraps that the players were eating about an hour to an hour and a half before a game, like not that long beforehand. And a lot of people would look at that and think like, oh, how are you eating so close to the game? But I think it was that perception amongst the rugby union players that they liked to feel full and like, not hungry before they play. Whereas in rugby league, what I've noticed with the boys is they're definitely more on the camp of I'm going to have a big breakfast and then I'm tapering back for the rest of the day. They like to feel light before a game, and it just depends on the person, how you feel in the day. Sometimes you might fit in a bit more food than other days. If you're particularly nervous coming up against a certain team, it might impact your appetite a bit more than another day. Just trying your best to still be consistent with your food intake. And the not being superstitious thing, that's a really important one, I find, from a mindset point of view on game day, is that lots of people from a young age get like superstitious about certain foods that they want to eat on game day. Like, I hear little kids say things like, oh, I must have blue Gatorade every game day. But when you're superstitious about something on game day, if that goes wrong, it can start to feel like the rest of your day is going wrong. And then that can impact your mindset as you go out onto the field. So with food, like absolutely understand the guidelines of what we're aiming for nutritionally with your food on game day, but know that there are a couple of different options at each of those meals that you could choose from. Don't feel like you have to have the same breakfast and the same lunch every game day, because something might go wrong. You might not have that food available at home. You might be traveling and that food's not available to you. So you need to know what your backup options are. So don't be superstitious, because it's just not helpful. Know that you've got a few different options that you could choose from.
And if the canteen runs out of blue Powerade, you just have to accept it and go with the yellow or red. So,
yeah,
or
exactly.
just buy it. Just buy it the night before, like we said. Be prepared and have that routine set.
Yes.
So one question I probably didn't write down that probably should be covered is how important is nutrition on, say, for training, but on game day as well?
Look, obviously I'm going to be biased because I'm a dietitian, so I'm going to say it is extremely important. I genuinely do believe that it is important, because if you run out onto the field having not eaten anything that day, you're going to be running on an empty fuel tank. That energy that we've got stored in our body is only going to last you so long, especially if you're playing the full game. And that means that you're going to hit the wall at some point in the game, and your performance is going to drop off when your energy levels start to drop off. So if you want to be able to perform the entire time that you are out on the field, then you need to be making sure that you are fueling up your body beforehand. And so those days leading into the game are, of course, important for that. And I always say training is your most important day of the week nutritionally, because it's where you practice what you're going to do on game day. If you don't get your training nutrition right, it's a lot harder to get your game day nutrition right. So yeah, definitely very important in my opinion.
I think it's something that certain players don't learn until they're out of school. So those Colts players having to come in around, say, like 10:30, and then playing a game at 12, and then having to back up for second grade, and then potentially, if injuries occur, maybe play first grade as well, and probably don't understand how important that nutrition factor is. Because if you only had, say, a small breakfast and you haven't had any snacks or anything like that, or the only snacks you've had during the day is some lollies, then you're probably not going to be able to perform. And if your goal is to go up the ranks in grade, you really need that to nail your nutrition and have those snacks available, and just listen to this podcast episode to make sure you understand as well. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So do athletes need to take supplements?
All right. So short answer, no, we don't need to. But long answer is, I'm not a dietitian that's against supplements in any way. I do use supplements with the athletes that I work with. There is a time and a place for supplements though. So the short answer is no, because I don't want people to listen to this podcast and hear me say, yes, use supplements, and then go out and buy anything.
Use my code. Go use my code.
We do have to have a good understanding of why you need to be cautious around supplement use. And then if you do choose to use supplements, understanding that it is your own responsibility. It's not even your dietitian's responsibility. It's your own. You choose what you put into your body, and understand, okay, if I'm buying a supplement, which ones are actually beneficial and useful, and which ones are safe for me to use. So I'll sort of dive a little bit deeper into all of that for you. So let's use the cupcake analogy. Imagine that your diet is the base of the cupcake. So a healthy, balanced diet is your foundation. Then the icing on top of that is some of these extras that we learn about, things like your nutrient timing, carb periodization, getting your hydration right, nailing your recovery, understanding all the micronutrients in food and what they do and why you need them and how much of those you need. And then supplements are the sprinkles on the icing on the cake. So we don't need those supplements unless we're getting the foundations right first. Then we can layer on our icing, and then we can add in the sprinkles on top. So supplements by definition are just that. They are to supplement the diet, not to replace food. So I always approach diets with a food first approach. And another caveat here as well is age, of course. So supplements are a highly concentrated source of a nutrient. And for that reason, when people are really young, it's probably not suitable. Well, most supplements aren't suitable to take because it is a high dose of a certain nutrient that the body might not be able to handle just yet or might not need. And people, I say this way too often, people often take way more of the supplement than what's actually recommended. So especially from a young age, the best thing you can do is focus on your diet first, get those foundations right. And then as your body develops, as you improve in your performance, in your game and everything, then you can start to think about adding the supplements on top. But they're really honestly a waste of money unless you get the diet right first.
And I love that part that you just said. You're probably taking too much. And if you already have a good balanced diet and getting some really good carbs and protein in there, then you're having a protein shake on top of all that, you're probably overdoing it. You just like you said, you're probably just wasting your money. So stick with food first. That's a good answer. I love it. That's awesome. Hi, everyone. We just wanted to take a break from this episode. We hope you're enjoying this episode so far and also all the content we have produced. We appreciate all the support from our listeners and followers so far. If you haven't already, sign up to Elite Rugby SandC newsletter today. We provide you a free, exclusive content each and every single week to our subscribers. Link in the bio. Remember to like, subscribe, and share Elite Rugby SandC on social media to all your friends and families. So thanks again for your support, and now back to the episode. So in today's world, with that abundance of information available at the click of a finger, how do athletes know who to trust and who not to trust when it comes to nutritional advice and, say, supplements as well?
So going back to what I said earlier about checking people's credentials, I know that if you see a nutrition post come up on your social media like Instagram, TikTok, you won't necessarily know their credentials from having a look at it. But what I would recommend for anyone that is an athlete or an aspiring athlete is that if you want nutrition advice, social media is probably not your best source of information for nutrition advice, because what's put out on social media is, look, if a dietitian is putting out information on social media, we're bound by code of conduct that we can only provide very general information. So the information that we provide on social media is going to be very, very general. But what you see with like nutrition coaches is that oftentimes they're providing really quite specific advice that might be more from personal experience than actual evidence. And so we know that every person is unique and individual. All our nutrition needs are very different to each other. And you will see elite athletes aren't really posting their nutrition intake on their social media. So why are we taking the advice from a nutrition coach that maybe is not an elite athlete themselves? The best source of information for athletes is to see an accredited sports dietitian. And the easiest way you can find a sports dietitian is just to do a Google search of Sports Dietitians Australia, have a look at the website, and then you can locate them in a location near you or book one in online. In terms of supplement information, so your team doctor, if you have one with your team that you're with, is your best source for any kind of medication information. So when we talk about supplements and supplement safety, it actually encompasses medications as well. And it encompasses all your supplements like fish oils and vitamins and, all those types of supplements. It's not just to do with protein powders that we typically think of. It encompasses everything. So your team doctor is your best source for medication information, or just your local doctor. And then a sports dietitian is your best source of information for everything supplements, so outside of medications. And so, as I said, anything on social media, it can be tricky to know what is the good versus bad information. So I'd recommend, if you do want to follow people on social media for nutrition information, always remember it's not individual advice, it's just general. The best people to follow on social media are dietitians. That's just a shameless little plug there for myself, rather than someone that's just, marketing themselves as a nutrition coach.
Yeah, that's some great advice. And yeah, just make sure that you ask the question, like literally reach out to that person and ask, are you accredited by this? Or what's your background and what's your university background type thing? And just asking the question can help a lot. Or say if you know your SandC coach, or someone who is in that health professional practice, like ask them, is this person actually good for nutritional advice or not? So don't just go by followers or how many followers they have or views or anything like that, because unfortunately sometimes it's not like that. It's some of the people who are actually really, really good don't have that much of a following just as of yet, but they might get bigger in the future. So yeah, don't just go by the number of TikTok followers or Instagram followers there. That would be my advice as well.
It's interesting because the people that do seem to get a lot of the followers, the reason is because they can post whatever they like. They're not being, I guess, accountable to a credentialing body. So there isn't like that code of conduct that they have to adhere to. Whereas a lot of health professionals have so much great advice they can give out, but unfortunately not allowed to put everything out on social media because we can't provide anything specific. We have to be very general because that's part of our code of conduct. So I do find social media is a great place for inspiration, particularly for recipes and cooking videos. But always remember, it's just very general. Don't take individual advice on social media. You're always going to be better off seeking out personalized, individualized advice.
Totally. Oh, that's great. So how do you educate coaches on realistic timeframes for muscle gain and fat loss while still trying to maintain elite level performance?
It's a really good question. So obviously being in this space for 5 years now, it's something that I do have to deal with on a daily basis. In like professional sport teams, we monitor the player's body composition. So this is different to just weighing yourself. When you weigh yourself, it just tells us our body weight. It doesn't tell us about, did you gain muscle mass? Did you gain fat mass? It just tells us weight has increased or it's decreased or it stayed the same. We know that when it comes to performance, we're usually trying to optimize muscle mass and minimize fat mass. And so if someone's trying to gain weight, for example, and a coach wants to discuss timeframes, and if they say to me, Kelsey, this player needs to put on 10 kilograms in the next month, I've got some general sort of safety guidelines of what is safe in terms of weight gain, particularly for young athletes. So gaining a lot of weight really quickly can place some extra stress on tendons and ligaments and increase athlete injury risk. So that's something that I always approach with coaches, particularly. It's usually more so I'm discussing this with strength and conditioning coach and head of performance, in that, if we want to look after our athletes and ensure that they're able to play, we need to be looking after their safety as well. And that comes into play with injury risk. Really lucky in the sport environment, most coaches are very aware of that as well. So that's not really been an issue that I've had to deal with. We, have those really good conversations, and that's always usually fine. So a safe amount of weight gain that I usually recommend for young athletes might be anywhere from 250 to 500 grams per week. And for some people, that might not sound like a lot, but what we're aiming for is being able to keep that weight on for the long term. So we're focusing on sustainable weight gain, but also focusing on it not increasing too quickly, that we're, increasing their injury risk. So on the other side of things, weight loss can be one that is a little bit trickier, because weight loss can be affected by so many things. And I find that often, weight loss has a little bit more of a mental component or a psychological component to it than the weight gain does. If we just think about, most people, it's nice being told to gain weight. You're okay with that. Okay, I get to eat more food. Awesome. But being told that you want to lose weight is often a little bit harder. And so in terms of realistic timeframes with weight loss, that's where body composition does come in, because a lot of the time when working with particularly rugby athletes who have high muscle mass, but coaches want them to meet a certain weight, we have to look at body composition and go, okay, well, assessing their body composition, this is how much muscle mass they have, and this is their body fat levels. Is it actually realistic that we get them to that weight in that time frame, because they don't actually have that much fat mass to lose? Do we actually need to dial back the muscle mass a little bit? Do we need to change their training so that they're not doing hypertrophy type of training, which is going to increase their weight if we want them to meet a certain weight for their position? And then also seeing where that person is at. So if they are wanting to lose significant amounts of weight, but they don't know a lot about nutrition yet. Maybe they've come, up from junior ranks and haven't learnt a lot about nutrition. So getting them to lose weight quickly means that they're probably more at risk of doing practices like fasting and, skipping meals, which is obviously going to have an impact on their performance. And so that's not ideal. So we need to spend a bit of time on education to help them lose weight in a safe, effective way, and also, again, sustainable. So yeah, there's lots of ins and outs to it. It really depends on the individual person, but having those conversations and just discussing all the factors that do affect weight loss and weight gain helps put it into perspective.
It's a great answer. It's so many questions popping up in my head just then. I think it's really important with the weight gain that you understand why you want that athlete to increase their weight. Is it to be able to handle contact? Is it just because their position or the opposition is a lot heavier than them and they need to bulk up for that? Say a prop, for example, in rugby union, they have to be a certain weight because they have to deal with certain impacts. Yeah, it really comes back to, why do you want them to increase the mass? And if you are increasing their mass, just remember it's going to possibly impact their performance in some way as well. If they're really fast and you want them to put on 10 kilos, their speed's going to suffer. So it's just like you said, you have to slowly increase their weight over a duration. It can't just be in a month. I think that's just really unrealistic as from coaches and athletes. So you really got to remember that, okay, if I want to increase weight, I got to make sure I understand what makes that athlete really special. And I don't want to impact that. I actually want to continue to enhance their capabilities on the field. And if you're losing weight, again, just make sure that you understand and don't tell our athlete, oh, you're overweight, go lose weight, because that's not really helpful for anyone. And I've seen that, unfortunately, in my time being as an S&C coach, and it really sucks because if you're overweight, because I have been in the, call it fat club, but they don't call it anymore like that. Like you have to do extras and you actually say, I'm actually working really hard. It's just really hard for me to lose weight sometimes. So I think you got to be a bit more supportive as well. And how you say, like, okay, you got a bit of unwanted mass. Let's try and lose it together. Don't just you go off and do it yourself. And being able to talk to someone like yourself would make it so much easier instead of just saying, like, as a head coach, just go lose some weight, such and such. So I think it's really important that you remember those things for losing weight and gaining weight as well.
Just on like the weight loss and fat clubs in quotation marks, we've definitely moved away from calling it fat club because I think particularly in men's teams there's always been a perception that men aren't affected by using that type of language, but they definitely are, and that can have such a big impact on like your mental health. And we know that performance isn't just its little island on its own. Your performance is going to be impacted by everything. It's impacted by your nutrition, your mental health, what's going on at home. These things are all interrelated. And so, as you said, if a coach just says like, hey, you need to lose weight, if that player's not supported in that journey and is not actually provided with the knowledge and the skills to be able to do that safely and effectively and still be focusing on their performance as well, it can just make it like a really isolating environment for them. It can affect their mental health, and that's actually then not getting the outcomes that are wanted at all. So it's so important to have someone that can be there to support players or athletes when they do that. And luckily in elite sports teams, there's your wellbeing counselors, there's your dietitian that is going to help support players with that. At lower levels, when maybe you don't have access to all those services, that's where I would recommend, if you have been told by a coach, hey, we want you to lose weight, okay, that's easier said than done. I would recommend just seeking out support individually in order to help you do that, so that you can make sure you do it in like a safe and supportive environment.
Totally. So to sum that sort of weight gain and weight loss, would you say for weight gain, you're just trying to eat a little bit more each week, and then for weight loss, you're just trying to reduce a bit of your intake each week? Like, to really simplify it.
Yeah. If we talked about weight loss and weight gain and how they occur, that is the simple equation. So on paper, if you consume more energy than what your body requires, you will gain weight over a period of time. And if you consume less energy than what your body requires day to day over a period of time, then you will lose weight. So that's the simple equation when we write it down on paper, but we do know it's easier said than done. So when it comes to weight gain, I find that particularly with a lot of the young male athletes that I work with, especially high school age, usually they are burning a lot more energy across the day than they realize, and probably just not taking as many breaks to consume food as what they need to be in order to meet their energy requirements and then gain weight on top of that. So, and especially when people are at school still, so like teenage sort of age as well, I find that a lot of boys sort of spend recess and lunch, playing footy rather than actually sitting down to eat something. So just a general rule of thumb, if you're trying to gain weight, let's say start with 6 small meals a day. When we have those small meals across the day, you're going to be more likely to get in the energy across the whole day rather than trying to just aim for like 1 or 2 really big meals, where you're going to feel really full, probably a bit sluggish afterwards, and takes a longer time to digest than having in those 6 small meals. And always make sure that you eat something before and after your training sessions, and a protein source before bed. So that could just be some milk, some yogurt, or if you've spoken to a sports dietitian, it might be a protein shake. And then in reverse, as I said, consuming less energy than what your body needs on a daily basis is on paper how we lose weight. But starving yourself is not how we want to do that. Skipping meals is not what I would suggest, because what it means is that you're going to be running on an empty fuel tank when you get to your training sessions. You're going to be tired. You're not going to get the performance outcomes that you want out of those training sessions. Your recovery is going to be impacted if you're skipping meals around your training sessions. So we need to be really strategic about meal timing when your goal is weight loss, but you're especially mid-season and we're trying to still perform for games on the weekend. So ideally pre-season is the time to focus on that when you do have a little bit more ability to do that. And then in season, we're trying to just maintain where we're at. But if you get to that point where you have to do it in season, like we do have to be really strategic about meal timing. And it's not just about like skipping meals and reducing your portion sizes. Let's go back to that performance plate that I mentioned before. Instead of dividing your plate up into thirds, think about your plate being in half and then 2/4. So on one half of your plate, fill it up with heaps of vegetables. On a quarter of your plate is your carbs, and a quarter of the plate is protein. And so if you do that at breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then have a couple of snacks in the day that are protein based, that's going to be a really effective way of actually reducing the energy of your meals, but not reducing the volume of food that you eat. So we call that volume eating, because vegetables, low in calories, but they're high in fiber, so they fill you up. So fill up your meals with vegetables, you've reduced your calories, but you still get to eat food. So you don't feel like you're starving and restricting yourself. And then we're still getting plenty of protein in and good carbs in. That's a good place to start for most people, but that's very, very general information. So I definitely recommend seeking advice if you're in that boat.
But yeah, I think that's a great place to start for people. And I think a lot of people probably don't know that. So it's just nailing those basics and then, yeah, sort out more help if you do need it. That was great. So one challenge in sport is trying to convince athletes not to eat so much fast food. And in my experience, and probably the same as in your experience as well, but athletes will eat that fast food, and hopefully it's just once every now and again or a special treat or something like that. And if athletes are going to have that fast food, is there any, I don't know, better options, or there's certain options that they should avoid and get that part of the menu, or what?
Yeah, it's a good question. I like to think that I'm a very realistic person. I'm not expecting the athletes that I work with to be meal prepping every single meal that they eat and to absolutely nail their groceries every week, because we're all just human at the end of the day. So things happen. You don't always have food available. You get hungry on the way home from training, don't really feel like cooking. That's totally fine. At least we need to have some options up our sleeve that we know aren't going to completely sort of derail what we're trying to work on in terms of our nutrition for health and for performance. So there are some fast food options that you can go for that are probably better than something like KFC or McDonald's. So I'm a big fan of Mexican if you choose the right option. Burrito bowls with brown rice, and I always suggest asking for extra salad in the burrito bowl. So there's plenty of options. Guzman's, Zambreros, Mad Mex all do burrito bowls and have drive-through, so that's quite easy option for a lot of people depending where you are. Japanese food is also a great sort of takeaway or on-the-go option. Sushi rolls on their own, really high in carbs, not actually a lot of protein. So usually I suggest if you're grabbing some sushi, let's say it's like, lunch break at work, you just need to grab something quickly. A couple of sushi rolls, but also get the sashimi on the side so you've got more protein in there, and also some edamame, so at least you get the veggies in there as well. If you're in a food court, poke bowls can be a great option. And let's not forget as well that in Coles or Woolworths and most servos like 7-Eleven, there's lots of like convenient grab and go type of meals as well. So let's say it is, your lunch break at work. You go to 7-Eleven. I get this a lot with tradies. They do the servo stop for smoko, grab a sausage roll. Instead of the sausage roll, there's sandwiches. The sandwiches are actually like perfectly healthy option. They've even got multigrain and whole grain and, at least a bit of salad in there. So that can be a really good on the go sort of grab and go option.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's definitely a big fan of the Mexican food as well. So yeah, stop doing the KFC, go to GYG instead. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So how important is hydration to performance, and what are some tips for people who sort of struggle with their hydration throughout the day and on game day?
Hydration, very key, especially Australia. Normally when it's hot, we've had La Nina the last few years, so it hasn't really been that hot, but it gets hot here, especially pre-season training for rugby league and rugby union. Hydration, really, really important. So dehydration occurs when your fluid intake doesn't match the fluid losses. So we lose fluid during exercise and training when we sweat. Sweat is a mechanism for our body to cool itself down during exercise. When we sweat, we're not just losing water, we also lose electrolytes. And so your electrolytes includes sodium and magnesium, and those electrolytes actually help our body to absorb water. So if we sweat during training and during a game and we just replace it back with water and not with those electrolytes, we're usually not able to effectively rehydrate our body. So oftentimes, especially in hot weather where you're more likely to lose more of those electrolytes, we do need to add in electrolytes as well to help with rehydration. A simple sort of way to assess how hydrated you are is just to use your urine color. So again, you can chuck in a quick Google image search for urine color chart and it will give you a bit of an idea, but the darker yellow your urine color is indicates dehydration. Clear to pale yellow urine color indicates that you are well hydrated. So on a day-to-day basis, I recommend trying to make sure that your urine color sort of maintains around that pale yellow color. And similar to your game day food intake, training is your best opportunity to practice your hydration strategies for game day. So if you're not very good at keeping your body hydrated throughout the week and through training, it's going to be very hard to nail that on game day when it's arguably most important to be hydrated, because dehydration of even just 2% loss of your body weight and fluids can impact negatively on your performance. So it can impact your speed, your endurance, makes exercise feel more difficult. And then obviously the more fluids that you lose and more dehydrated you become, the more serious side effects can happen as well. So nail your weekday nutrition, your hydration, sorry. Keep track of your urine color, especially in the days leading into the game. So I always say to athletes, don't start your training sessions or your games unless your urine color is pale yellow. That's what you need to aim for. And then what you can use afterwards in terms of understanding how to rehydrate your body is to actually weigh yourself in before a training session and after a training session. And that difference in body weight is a good estimate of how much fluids you have lost and therefore how much you need to replace. So times that number by 1.5. So let's say you lose 1 kilogram of body weight. We can estimate we've lost around 1 liter of fluids. So we need to replace that back with 1.5 liters of fluids in order to rehydrate effectively.
Now, some great advice there. And the one thing I can remember and still emphasize this today is even during the in-season, so here in Canberra, it's much colder. So if you are playing sports when it is really, really cold during training, make sure that you're still sipping on the water, because you're doing pretty much the same work as when you started the season. Just obviously it's different depending which club you go to. But if you're doing heaps of fitness and stuff like that and you don't really feel like you need it, like still sip on the water, because I've seen times where athletes,
it's winter, I'm not really that thirsty. It's like, yeah, still have the hydration, you know, as you said, you're practicing for when it comes to game day. So why wouldn't you be taking the opportunity to have a quick sip of water during breaks between drills?
Such a great point as well. Thirst is not always a reliable indicator of how much we need to drink. So you might not feel thirsty, but your body actually still needs the fluids. So that's where using your urine color is a bit of an indicator of whether or not you have actually had enough. That's how you will know whether you need to be drinking more water on a daily basis. And it's much easier to hit your daily water target if you sip on it across the day and throughout training, rather than trying to like scull a whole bottle at the end of the evening when you realize that your urine color is dark yellow.
Yeah, it's the same thing with food. If you're just trying to get it in all in one take, your tummy is going to feel weird, and you're just going to feel very bloated, and yeah, it's not good for anyone. But that's all the questions I have for today, Kelsey. So where can listeners find you on social media?
So the main platform I'm utilizing at the moment is TikTok. Just Kelsey Hutton Dietitian on TikTok. If you look up Parramatta Eels, I've been posting a few TikTok videos, so you might find me by searching their hashtag. But I do also have Instagram and my own website as well. So kelseyhutton.dietitian for Instagram. And if you just click the links in my bios, you can be directed towards my website as well.
Awesome. So today's been fantastic, and there's so much information for our listeners to take and can use straight away. So yeah, we really appreciate you jumping on board today and taking time out.
No problems. Thanks so much for having me.
So thanks, Kelsey, and thank you everyone for listening.
So thanks for tuning into another episode of Elite Rugby SandC podcast. Remember to like, subscribe, and rate Elite Rugby SandC on Spotify, YouTube, and follow us on Instagram. Sign up to become a beast today via the link in the description or via Instagram page. Also, sign up to our newsletter and receive free bonus content each and every single week. So don't wait, make that good decision and join Elite Rugby SandC today and take your game to the next level.